All right. So in today's lesson, we are going to be looking at comparing and ordering numbers. We're going to start off with comparing numbers, and basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at two numbers and determining which number is bigger and which number is smaller. And we use the symbols over here that you see. This symbol here, which means less than. And it's important to know we read this from left to right. So we look at where this little arrow is pointing, the tip of this arrow is pointing to. It's pointing to the left. So that symbol represents that it means less than. That means the number on the left is less than the number on the right. And another way to look at this is the opening of this arrow, which is on the right side over here. It's like a mouth and it wants to eat the bigger number. If you look way over here with this symbol, this is the greater than symbol, which means the bigger number is on the left. And it's the same thing. That opening of this symbol is going to face the bigger number, and the point will face the smaller number. And this will make more sense when I show you this next example. And of course, this middle symbol, that just means equal to. That means the numbers are equal to. And we can also use these symbols when comparing different equations, where you might have something like 3 plus 3 is equal to, greater than, less than, 3 plus 2 or whatever. And we'll get into that later on in the year. But just take a look down here at these different numbers and how we use these symbols to compare numbers. This first example, I have 56 on the left, and then I have the number 72. And in the middle is this circle, and that's where we insert our symbol. It's like a blank that we need to insert our symbol. And so we need to determine, is 56 less than or greater than or equal to 72? And we know that by using place value, we look at the tens, and it's a 5, so that represents 50 on this left number. And on the right number over here, it's 70. And 70 is greater than 50. It's bigger than. So this would actually read 56 is less than 72. So we want to use the less than symbol. Remember, that arrow is going to point to the smaller number, and the opening or the mouth, it reminds me sort of like of an alligator. It's going to be facing the bigger number because it wants to eat the bigger meal. So again, we read this left to right. 56 is less than 72. Okay, now let's take a look at this next example. We have 432 blank 289. Is it less than, greater than, or equal to 289? Now in this case, it's actually greater than. So we want to make sure we use the proper symbol, the greater than symbol. Okay, because this number on the left, remember we read everything just like when we're reading a story or a book, we read everything left to right. So just like that, the number on the left going to the right is greater than the number on the right. So the mouth of the alligator is going to be facing the bigger number, and that's the greater than symbol. So we read it left to right. 432 is greater than 289. Okay? Now there's two things when you're comparing numbers to remember. The first is you want to use the proper symbol. You can't get those two symbols confused, the less than and the greater symbol confused. The opening is always going to eat the bigger number, and the point of the arrow is always going to point to the smaller number. So if the smaller number is on the left, like in the first example down here, then we're going to use the less than symbol. If the bigger number is on the left, then we're going to use the greater than symbol. Okay? And the other really important thing to remember when comparing numbers is to always remember to look at the place value of the numbers. This last example down here, we have two numbers. And some people, they just want to look right away at the first digit in each number, like this one's a 3, and then over here it's a 9, and say, oh, well 9 is greater than 3, so this must read that it must read this way, that the number on the left is less than the number on the right, because I know that 3 is smaller than 9. However, if you look at the place value, it's a much different value for each number. For instance, this number on the right, the 9, is in the hundreds place, while the number on the left, the 3, is in the thousands place. And while the digit 9 is bigger than the 3, because the 3 is in the thousands place value, the 3 is actually a bigger number because it represents 3,000. The 9 only represents 900. And remember, thousands are much bigger than hundreds. So in fact, this would actually read the opposite. That 3,475 is greater than 987. So make sure you're really paying attention to the numbers and the digits and what place value they have when comparing numbers. Now let's take a look at ordering numbers. And ordering numbers really is comparing numbers, but it's comparing more than two numbers. It's three or more. And when you're ordering them, you're putting them in order. And you can put them in order in a couple different ways. You can put them in order from the least to the greatest, which means you're putting them in order from the smallest to the biggest. Okay, so from least to greatest. Or you may be even putting them in order from greatest to least, or from the biggest number to the smallest number. And that's really important to pay attention when you're reading word problems or when you're reading some questions, that you pay attention to what order they're looking for you to put them in. You don't want to be told to put something in order from greatest to least and then order them least to greatest, because you'll get it wrong, right? So this is really important. You really want to focus on what is being asked. Is it this being asked, or is this going to be asked here? Okay? And let me show you an example down here. Let's take these four numbers. For instance, if I told you, hey, look at these four numbers and put them in order from least to greatest, you want to make sure you're doing it from the smallest to the biggest and not the opposite way. Okay? So I start with the smallest, which happens to be 45. And drag it over. Then slide these out of the way. Then the next smallest is going to be 65. Then 67. And then finally, the biggest number out of all those numbers is 92. That's going from smallest to biggest, from least to greatest. If I went from greatest to least, really it's just the opposite. I'm just going to really flip-flopping these numbers around. I would start with 92, and I would work my way up to, or work my way down rather, to the smallest number. Okay? That's going from greatest to least. It's really, really important when comparing numbers to pay attention to what is being asked. Are you being asked to go from the biggest to the smallest, or from the smallest to the biggest? Okay? Shoot that. And then another important thing to remind you about too is, just like comparing numbers, you want to make sure that you're really paying attention to the place values and not just going by the first digit in the number. Because just like when you're comparing the numbers, they could look a lot different. For instance, if you look at these numbers, if I just go by the first digit in every number, okay, then I might have something that look like this. Yeah, let's move these out of the way. If I was telling you to order these numbers from smallest, from smallest to biggest, or from least to greatest, okay, and I just looked at the first digits of every number, then I might have something that looked like this. I would start with 2,444, then go to 3,563, then 3,653, and then finally the 987. But again, remember that this would be incorrect because my place values are determining really what numbers are bigger. This 9 is not bigger because it's in the hundreds. These are all in the thousands, which means they are actually bigger. So this number would actually be the smallest and would need to be put in front. So it's very important to pay attention to these place values. Take a look at the practice lessons and give it a try for yourself.